Exodus chapter 14 verses 13 to 16 and 21 to 22. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will shew to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. For many people, the parting and drying of the Red Sea seemed too incredible to be true. When asked to explain this story in a logical and scientific way, many people simply reply that to an almighty God, nothing is impossible. Incredible as the story of the Exodus was, and while it is true that the miracles performed by God through Moses highlights his almighty power, all the events during the Exodus, including the parting and drying of the Red Sea, can be explained scientifically. Interestingly, the scientific explanation to the Red Sea miracle is also the same scientific explanation to one of the 10 plagues that happened in Egypt during the Exodus, namely the plague of the heavy hail mingled with fire. Exodus chapter 9 verses 22 to 25. Then the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man, on beast, and on every herb of the field, throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire darted to the ground. And the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was hail, and fire mingled with the hail, so very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. And the hail struck throughout the whole land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail struck every herb of the field, and broke every tree of the field. How does one explain the fire mingled with the heavy hail? Some choose to explain the fire with lightning, but the Bible specifically said that the fire mingled with the hail, and not just sporadically hitting the hail with random lightning. Also, the Bible used the Hebrew word aish for this verse, which translates as fire, instead of baruch, which translates as lightning, and as used in another verse. Exodus chapter 19 verse 16. Then it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings, Hebrew baruch, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. I believe the heavy hail mingled with fire were actually meteors composed of ice, rock, and metal that fell on earth, and which were large enough to reach the ground without totally disintegrating in mid-air. To give us an idea of just how large these meteors really were, we can look to the book of Revelation to know the weight of the hail which God used for punishment. Revelation chapter 16 verse 21. From the sky, huge hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, fell on people, and they cursed God on account of the plague of hail, because the plague was so terrible. In comparison, the heaviest hail in modern record was a mere 2.25 pounds, which fell in Bangladesh on April 14, 1986. Thus, the heavy and fiery hail which plagued Egypt during the Exodus were not the regular hail created by Earth's weather. Instead, and as I already mentioned earlier, these hail were actually icy meteors that came from the debris field of a collision between a comet and an asteroid that happened several months before the Exodus. However, the Earth only entered this debris field and experienced its disastrous effect just shortly before and after the Exodus. In one of my next videos, I will be revealing to you the identities of this comet and asteroid. But for now, I just want to discuss how the debris from this astronomical collision can explain the miracles that happened during the Exodus. The nucleus of a comet is composed of an amalgamation of rock, dust, water ice, and other frozen gases, while asteroids are mainly composed of metal and rock. Recently, however, some asteroids were discovered to also contain water ice both on its surface as well as buried deep within its rocky and metallic surface. Meteors are mostly separated fragments from comets or asteroids that were naturally ejected during their close passage to the Sun, while others are collision impact debris ejected from colliding bodies. Now some of you may ask, shouldn't the meteor ice have melted in Earth's atmosphere before it reaches the ground and appear as hail mingled with fire? Well, remember, the meteors that fell from outer space were composed of ice, rock, and metal. And the rock and metal layer of these meteors were what shielded the meteor ice from friction with Earth's atmosphere as they hurled down towards the ground. Also, because rock and metal are denser than ice, the center of mass of these meteors were located on their rocky and metallic side and not on their icy side. Thus, the rocky and metallic side of the meteors were the ones facing and bearing the brunt of the atmospheric friction rather than the icy side. And this explains why the phenomenon of heavy hail mingled with fire raining down on ancient Egypt actually happened. Interestingly, a similar and related question was asked in the curious.astro.cornell.edu website, and I quote, "Movies always depict meteors as flaming balls of fire, streaking across the sky and igniting anything they touch after they reach the Earth. Is this true? I know that they get hot as they enter our atmosphere, but I also know that it is pretty cold in space, so they start out with quite a chill. Do meteors really get hot enough to keep them flaming all the way to the ground? If a meteor fell at my feet, could I touch it? Would it be cold or hot?" Here is the answer from the reference website, and I quote, "This is a good question, and one that we really don't have a great answer for. It's true that the chunks of rock and or ice that form meteorites have been traveling through space for at least millions of years, and are therefore very cold when they begin their descent through our atmosphere. As they hit the atmosphere, the outside of the rock begins to heat up. The hot outside begins to ablate, or be stripped off, which removes heat. The meteorite falls through the atmosphere in seconds, so for larger rocks, only the outside part has time to be heated. So the question is, when they hit, are they still cold because the hot parts of the rock were removed via ablation? Or does the outside manage to get hot enough to burn things inside? Many astronomers believe that even small rocks hitting the ground should not be hot. In a Science at NASA article about the recent fireball over Pennsylvania, written by Tony Phillips, the planetary scientist Don Yeomans is quoted as saying, "Rocky asteroids are poor conductors of heat. Their central regions remain cool even as the hot outer layers are ablated away. Small rocky meteorites found immediately after landing will not be hot to the touch." Now, how does the scientific explanation for the phenomenon of the hail mingled with fire also explain the phenomenon of the dividing and drying up of the Red Sea? Other people besides and before me have already suggested that the Israelites were able to cross the Red Sea via an ice bridge. These people argue, and I agree with them, that the Bible never said the Israelites walked on dry ground. It only said they walked on something dry, meaning something solid and not liquid, like dry ice, for example. This can be confirmed if we look at Strong's Concordance for the following verses, namely Exodus chapter 14, verse 16 and 21 to 22. You can see in this concordance that the words ground and land, which I underlined, were inserted in brackets, and this means that these words were actually not included in the original Hebrew text. Thus, the suggestion by others that the Israelites walked on ice is still valid at this point in my opinion. However, none of these people who argued for an ice bridge to explain the Red Sea crossing have answered scientifically the following questions. How were the waters of the Red Sea divided? How was this ice bridge constructed? And how does one explain the walls of water on the right and left-hand sides of the people who crossed the Red Sea? As I already suggested earlier, all of these questions can actually be answered scientifically by the mid-air explosion as well as the direct impact of icy meteors near or on the Red Sea. Now let me explain what happened step by step. The Los Alamos National Laboratory has made a scientific study titled Visualization and Analysis of Threats from Asteroid Ocean Impacts. In this study, they explained step by step what happens when an asteroid made either a direct impact and explosion on an ocean or a mid-air explosion instead that results to an air burst near an ocean. I believe the rocky and metallic layer of the ultra-large meteors that fell on the Red Sea exploded in mid-air and caused an air burst, while the remaining icy layer of these meteors disintegrated into smaller pieces and made direct hits on the Red Sea. Now, according to the scientific study, the following are the events that will happen to an ocean following either a direct hit or a nearby air burst from a large meteor. Number 1. A transient or temporary crater is created. Number 2. This transient crater is accompanied by a splash curtain. Number 3. A water jet is formed in the middle of this transient crater, rising to elevations that can be as high as several kilometers. Number 4. This water jet will then collapse, forming a rim wave hundreds of meters high surrounding it. And finally, number 5. After this water jet has totally collapsed, a deep crater will form in the center of the rim wave. Now let us compare these scientific findings with how the Bible described what happened during the parting and drying up of the Red Sea. Exodus chapter 15 verse 8. By the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging waters stood up like a wall. The deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. The blast of your nostrils, mentioned in this verse, clearly describes the air burst that happened when the rocky and metallic layer of the large meteors that fell on the Red Sea exploded nearby in mid-air. The waters piled up, mentioned in this verse, clearly describes the water jet that was formed as a result of this air burst. As mentioned earlier, this water jet can rise up to several kilometers high. Thus, the description of waters piling up is really quite appropriate. The surging waters stood up like a wall, mentioned in this verse, clearly describes the rim wave surrounding the water jet like a wall and which rapidly flowed out or surged as the water jet started to collapse. The deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea, mentioned in this verse, clearly describes the deep crater that was formed in the middle or heart of the rim wave as the water jet totally collapsed. The congealing of this deep crater, as well as the rim wave surrounding it, is a clear description of the sea water instantly freezing into ice as the extremely cold icy meteors came in contact with it. Now imagine several of these icy craters surrounded by icy rim waves being formed in a straight line that connects the western shore of the Red Sea in Egypt to its eastern shore in Arabia. The creation of this row of icy craters surrounded by icy rim waves answers the question on how the waters of the Red Sea were divided, as its northern part was separated or blocked from its southern part by this row of ice. Now the question is, how were these icy craters surrounded by icy rim waves eventually transformed into an ice bridge which one can use to cross the Red Sea from its western shore to its eastern shore? Clearly, the icy rim waves surrounding the icy craters like a circular wall will prevent anyone from entering these craters and use them as a solid path for walking. Now here is where the strong east wind that blew all night comes into focus, as this strong wind helped create the ice bridge by using and transforming this row of water craters surrounded by water rim waves. Exodus chapter 14 verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. Now imagine this. Moments before the water craters surrounded by water rim waves were frozen into ice by the icy meteors, a gust of east wind blows through the middle of these craters that is strong enough and narrow enough so as to flatten only the rim waves facing the west and the east, but not the rim waves facing the north and the south. Imagine also that immediately as these rim waves facing the west and the east were flattened, the icy meteors instantly froze the water craters and the rim waves facing the north and the south as soon as they came into contact. The result will be an ice bridge shaped like a hollow, semi-cylindrical shell that connects the western shore of the Red Sea to its eastern shore. Also, the flattened rim waves facing the west and the east will be frozen as well, and this will form a flat and straight path for the Israelites to walk on. Thus, the strong and narrow gust of east wind helped answer the question on how the ice bridge, shaped like a hollow, semi-cylindrical shell, was formed and constructed. It explains as well the walls of congealed or frozen water on the right and left-hand sides of the people who crossed the Red Sea. Also, if the ice bridge created was especially clear and not cloudy, the Israelites will see through waves of water pounding on the great walls of clear ice on both their sides, prompting them to describe what they saw as walls of water on their right and on their left. By the way, clear ice is created by first boiling the water to remove dissolved gas trapped inside before freezing it. And this is exactly what happened to the waters of the Red Sea, which was first exposed to heat from the fiery explosion of the meteor's rocky and metallic layer before being frozen instantly by the icy layer of the large meteors. Now ice floats on water, so the next question is, how does one hold still this ice bridge and keep it from drifting so as to allow all the Israelites, estimated to number more than 1 million, to enter it? To answer this question, we have to know first how water flows in and out of the Red Sea. The Red Sea has 4 primary inflows which are all located at the western shore of the Red Sea, and these are the Wadi Gasus, Barka River, and Seba River, and Hadass River. The Red Sea has only one primary outflow, namely Bab el-Mandeb, which is located at the southern tip of the Red Sea. Thus, to prevent the ice bridge from drifting southwards towards Bab el-Mandeb, one simply has to stop the flow of water coming from the 4 primary inflows located at the western shore of the Red Sea. And the Bible tells us that God did exactly just that by using a strong east wind to drive back or reverse the inflow of water coming from the west, and possibly to dry up temporarily these 4 river sources as well. Exodus chapter 14 verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. Now for the next question, is it possible to get a good estimate of how big this ice bridge was? To get a good estimate of the size or volume of this enormous ice bridge, we have to identify first the exact spot where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. According to the Bible, the exact spot where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea was directly opposite an idol called Baal Zephon, which is literally translated as Lord of the North. Exodus chapter 14 verses 1 to 2. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi-Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal Zephon." Arabia is where the eastern shore of the Red Sea is located, and it is directly opposite Egypt, where the western shore of the Red Sea is, and where the Israelites encamped before crossing the Red Sea. Clearly, Baal Zephon was an idol worshipped by the Arabs at the time of the Exodus, Now where could this ancient idol be located and worshipped by the Arabs? In my opinion, there could have been only one place in all of Arabia that is ancient enough and famous enough, and that is the Kaaba. It is believed that the Kaaba was the first house of worship and that it was built by Abraham and Ishmael on God's instructions. Thus, the Kaaba was already existing and being used by the Arabs long before the time of Moses and the Exodus. Hubal was a god worshipped in pre-Islamic Arabia at the Kaaba in Mecca. According to Karen Armstrong, the sanctuary was dedicated to Hubal, who was worshipped as the greatest of the 360 idols the Kaaba contained, which probably represented the days of the year. Philip K. Hitti, who relates the name Hubal to an Aramaic word for spirit, suggests that the worship of Hubal was imported to Mecca from the north of Arabia, possibly from Moab or Mesopotamia, and that Hubal may have been the combination of Hu, meaning spirit or god, and the Moab god Baal, meaning master or lord. Thus, Hubal literally translates as the spirit lord from the north of Arabia, which coincidentally is also what Baal Zephon means. Another proof, in my opinion, why the Red Sea crossing took place directly opposite the Kaaba in Mecca was the presence of an ancient Egyptian fortress named Semna that is located also directly opposite of the Kaaba. Exodus chapter 14 verses 1 to 2 tells us that the Israelites encamped between Migdol and the sea just before crossing the Red Sea. According to Strong's Concordance, Migdol literally translates as tower. Thus, the ancient Egyptian fortress Semna, where towers were erected, could have been Migdol. The exact place where the Israelites encamped, according to Exodus chapter 14 verses 1 to 2, was a place between Migdol and the Red Sea called Pi Hahirot, which literally translates as place where sedge grows. Sedges are flowering plants which superficially resemble grasses. While sedges may be found growing in almost all environments, many are associated with wetlands. Interestingly, between Migdol and the Red Sea is located the Rawaya Lagoon, which is surrounded by a wetland that is barely above and barely below sea level. This wetland, I believe, was Pi Hahirot, which according to the Bible was near where the Israelites encamped shortly before crossing the Red Sea. If we now use Google Earth to measure the ground distance between this encampment and the eastern shore of the Red Sea facing Mecca, we get approximately 186.5 kilometers. Also, the average depth of the Red Sea is believed to be 0.5 kilometers. Using this data, we can now compute a good estimate of how large this ice bridge was. Letting 0.5 kilometer as the outer rim radius of the hollow semi-cylindrical ice bridge and half this distance, or 0.25 kilometer as the inner rim radius, and 186.5 kilometers as the length of the ice bridge, we calculate the volume of this hollow semi-cylindrical ice bridge as follows. Pi times the quantity 0.5 squared minus 0.25 squared times the quantity 186.5 divided by 2 equals approximately 55 cubic kilometers. Now, how much meteor ice is needed in order to construct this 55 cubic kilometers ice bridge? To answer this question, we have to know the temperature of both the meteor ice that came from outer space, as well as the waters of the Red Sea facing Mecca, where I believe the Red Sea crossing took place. The temperature of the meteor ice depends on the temperature of the outer space from which it came from. According to science.nasa.gov website, the temperature of Earth's sun-facing side will soar to 121 degrees Celsius, while thermometers on the dark side will plunge to minus 157 degrees Celsius. Now Exodus chapter 14 verse 21 tells us that the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land and the waters divided. This means that the temperature of the meteor ice should be based on Earth's dark side, which is minus 157 degrees Celsius, since the impact event occurred at night. As for the temperature of the Red Sea region, it can drop to as low as 13 degrees Celsius at night. However, since God sent a strong east wind coming from Mecca at that time, we should consider the coldest recorded temperature in Mecca as well. The coldest temperature ever recorded in Mecca was a cool 10 degrees Celsius, and I believe this temperature should be used in making the calculations. To know how much meteor ice is needed to construct a 55 cubic kilometer ice bridge, we use the following intermediate formula. Temperature of meteor ice times volume of meteor ice plus the quantity temperature of Red Sea water times volume of Red Sea water equals 0 degrees Celsius, the freezing point of water, times the sum of the volume of meteor ice and Red Sea water. Substituting our known values, we get minus 157 degrees Celsius times volume of meteor ice plus the quantity 10 degrees Celsius times volume of Red Sea water equals 0. Simplifying, we get volume of Red Sea water equals 15.7 times volume of meteor ice. This means the volume of Red Sea water, which the meteor ice can instantly freeze to 0 degrees Celsius, will be 15.7 times the volume of the meteor ice. And the meteor ice will still remain ice at 0 degrees Celsius. Now, to know how much meteor ice having a temperature of minus 157 degrees Celsius is needed to construct a 55 cubic kilometer ice bridge having a temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, we use the following formula. Volume of meteor ice equals 55 cubic kilometers divided by 16.7, which is the sum of the ratio of meteor ice and sea water. And the result is approximately 3.3 cubic kilometers of meteor ice. If we now imagine a perfectly spherical ice meteor having this volume, we get an ice meteor having approximately a diameter of 1.85 kilometer. Just a reminder though, the actual ice meteor that fell on the Red Sea was broken into many smaller pieces mid-air, each one having smaller volume, and this lessened greatly the severity of its direct impact. However, for the sake of argument, how disastrous for the environment would the direct impact be of a meteor having a 1.85 kilometer diameter? According to one study titled Environmental Perturbations Caused by the Impacts of Asteroids and Comets by author Richard P. Turco and others, the energy range from 10 raised to the 5th to 10 raised to the 6th power megaton, corresponding to explosion of comets and asteroids between 1.8 and 3 kilometers in diameter, is considered transitional between regional and global effects as far as environmental consequences are concerned. Since 1.85 kilometer, The diameter of the ice meteor that I believe hit the Red Sea is in the lower end of this range. I can safely say that this meteor impact affected only the regions of Egypt and Arabia, and in particular the Red Sea. So no global consequences should have been expected from this impact event. In one of my previous videos titled 2033, God's Final Jubilee and the Second Coming of Christ, I explained why I believe 1487 BC was the correct year for the Exodus. Knowing the correct year of the Exodus helped me identify the comet and the asteroid that collided sometime before the Exodus, and which I believe caused some of the miraculous events that happened during this time. I will be revealing the identities of this comet and asteroid in one of my next videos.